You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 19th of April. 6 more arrests over alleged sexual exploitation of teenage girl. Mr Justice Singh directed court not to be told of race of victims. Broadmore's catalogue of DVDs with scenes of brutal violence and kinky sex. Belgian police raid homes in connection with Syrian terror groups' recruits. Germany cracks down on critics of mega mosque. EU budget fraud over £4 billion a year is 12 times official estimates. Nick Griffin MEP on Baroness Thatcher's funeral, his kneecaps and much more. Brothers from Chechnya behind Boston Marathon bombing. Muslim Brotherhood links Boston attack to anti-Islam conspiracy. Boston bombings a message to West, Muslim cleric says. Arrested man wanted to start sex slave operation. Thought for the day, bedroom tax, extensions and where beat the heart of a nation. And finally, shell shock Sydney or maybe not. UK news. 6 more arrests over alleged sexual exploitation of teenage girl. Police investigating the alleged sexual exploitation of a 16-year-old girl have arrested 6 more people today. 6 men aged 16, 19, 22, 23, 30 and 31 were arrested by officers in Leicester this morning and remain in custody. 6 men had previously been charged in connection with the investigation. At their 2 previous court appearances, an order was imposed banning publication of their names, addresses and dates of birth. The Leicester Mercury, however, successfully challenged this order, which was removed by District Judge John Temperley. 1. Abid Ali Mubarak Ali, 39, of Gulaxton Street, Highfields, Leicester. Rakib Ekub, 20, of Maynard Road, Highfields, Leicester. Hamza Imtiaz Ali, 27, of Kashmir Road, Belgrave, Leicester. Bharat Mudwadia, 25, of Wickham Road, Humberstone, Leicester. Wajid Usman, 22, of No Fixed Abode. Chandresh Mistry, 37, of Berridge Lane, Belgrave, Leicester. All 6 men are due to appear at Leicester Crown Court on Monday the April 22nd when they will enter their plea. 2 youths aged 15 and 17 who have previously been arrested in connection with the investigation remain on police bail while further inquiries are carried out. This case has been underreported by the UK media, and what you will not find is that this is the same case which caused fury in some members of Leicester's Sikh community after it seemed the police were turning a blind eye to the sex abuse being carried out by paedophile Muslim grooming gangs. One consistent thing regarding this deviant Muslim grooming gang epidemic Britain is experiencing has been the reluctance of police forces to act robustly upon information received for fear of not upsetting the Muslim communities who have done nothing to stamp out this vile trend of Muslim sex gangs. Frustrated at the police lack of action, a group of Sikhs took action themselves, storming the Mughal Durbar restaurant in East Park Road, which was associated with the Islamic paedophile gang. Mr Justice Singh directed court not to be told of race of victims. Following up on last Friday's, the 11th of April, report on repeat sex offender Opamipo Jaji, teenage paedophile Opamipo Jaji is facing a life sentence today for raping an 11-year-old girl as she made her way home from school. He had a sexual interest in very young white girls and had attacked another before, the Independent revealed today. Jaji, 18, subjected his most recent victim to a 3-hour ordeal and threatened to stab her after she tried to run away. He was found guilty of rape at the Old Bailey after the brave youngster gave evidence against him. Throughout his trial, the judge, Mr Justice Singh, had directed that the jury should not be told of Jaji's obsession with young white girls, nor the race of a girl he had attacked 21 months earlier. He was given a 10-month detention and training order in September 2011, serving 5 months in custody for the earlier attack. In April last year he was fined £15 for failing to comply with the 10-month detention and training order, and a month later he was given a youth supervision order for 18 months for making indecent pictures of young girls. Sarah McLaren of the Crown Prosecution Service said outside court, "This was a vicious and horrific attack on a young victim. As a result of this conviction, a dangerous sexual offender has now been brought to justice. I would like to thank the 11-year-old victim and her family for their enormous strength and courage in supporting this prosecution." Detective Chief Inspector Adam Lowe of the Met Sapphire Command said this was a particularly brutal but unusual attack on an innocent 11-year-old schoolgirl who will no doubt continue to suffer the emotional scars of what happened to her for a very long time. "I would like to take this opportunity to praise the bravery of the victim and her family." World at 8 says, "If the CPS, police and courts had done their job months ago, they wouldn't need to thank the 11-year-old girl and family for their courage. This child would have been spared the invasive medical operation needed to make her abused body normal again. This Jaji should be castrated and left to bleed out, preferably in his own country." Broadmore's catalogue of DVDs with scenes of brutal violence and kinky sex. Broadmore Hospital, which houses the Yorkshire Ripper and cannibal killer Peter Brown, has a catalogue of more than 200 DVDs, including films showing twisted scenes of murder and sex attacks. The revelation was today branded astounding by a leading psychologist at the NHS Trust, which runs the hospital, defended the policy, claiming the films prepared patients for the outside world. A World at 8 writer says, "Oh, pull the other one. This is a Sikh type film time for the pervy boys, isn't it? I can just see all the NHS types with their raincoats in the dark." European news. Belgian police raid homes in connection with Syrian terror groups' recruits. Belgian police stormed 46 homes in the northern city of Antwerp and detained at least one man for allegedly recruiting volunteers to fight in Syria's civil war. Authorities revealed that the detained individual was the leader of the Sharia for Belgium, Fouad Belchikem. "We have indications that Sharia for Belgium was sending people to Syria to join terrorist groups there," Reuters quoted a spokesperson for Belgium's federal prosecutors as saying. Prosecutors had declined to confirm whether anyone else had been arrested. Sharia for Belgium is known as a Salafist group which is opposed to Syria's President Assad. Foreign insurgents have been playing an increasing role in Syria's civil war that began in March 2011 with street protests against the rule of Assad. Belgian authorities became concerned after it was reported that about 80 Belgians joined opposition fighters in Syria. The International Centre for the Study of Radicalisation, using open sources, estimates up to 5,500 foreign fighters have travelled to Syria since the beginning of the uprising. Of them, about 10% have come from Europe. Germany cracks down on critics of mega mosque. The Bavarian branch of Germany's domestic intelligence agency, the Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz, has placed under state surveillance German activists accused of fomenting hate against Muslims due to their opposition to the construction of a mega mosque in Munich. The move to silence critics of the mosque for being unconstitutional was announced by Bavarian Interior Minister Joachim Herrmann in a press conference on April 12th and represents an unprecedented threat to the exercise of free speech in post-reunification Germany. According to Politically Incorrect, our work of information is not orientated against Muslims but against the political ideology of Islam. Muslims are its first victims, most of all women. We want to liberate them from the shackles of this ideology so that they can integrate in our free democratic society. One thing is clear, we will maintain our way consistently and continue unswervingly. A nationalist spokesperson comments, "This is the thin end of a very multicultural and Islamic stick. The thick end is yet to come and will prove very uncomfortable for all concerned." EU budget fraud. Over £4 billion a year is 12 times official estimates. The European Union is being defrauded of more than £4 billion a year, 12 times official estimates, a damning parliamentary report claims. Agriculture subsidies, payments for projects in the poorest countries, bribery, corruption and cigarette smuggling are major reasons for the massive losses, said a House of Lords committee. In its latest budget report, the European Commission said that £348 million a year was going missing. But members of the Lords Justice Institutions and Consumer Protection EU subcommittees said this was an unrealistic estimate. I now hand you over to Nick Griffin MEP For his talk today on Baroness Thatcher's funeral, the Boston bombings, news from the Alliance of European of National Movements and a little known fact about the Speaker's knees.
Strasbourg this week for the monthly plenary voting session in Parliament. And how different to the icy city of just a month ago. It's been a brutal winter of global warming, not just at home, but over much of Europe. But spring has sprung on the western edge of France. The sun's come out, it's all been shirt sleeves and short skirts. For the secretaries, that is, not for me. I got severe lime burns many years ago through kneeling in wet concrete while laying a floor under a staircase, and my knees are still scarred. I'd look simply terrible in a flowery summer frock. I stayed this week at a small, cheap and cheerful hotel, several miles out of the city. If you go to any hotel or restaurant in Alsace, by the way, do try the tart flambe, or Flammenkuchen, as it's called in the area's traditional German dialect. Literally flame cake, it was traditionally the first thing put into a newly fired and very hot bread oven. Like an ultra-thin pizza without the tomato sauce, it's great to share with friends over a beer. The hotel is close to the Marne-Rhine Canal, which goes on to pass the Parliament, so I had a very enjoyable hour-long walk to work for the last 3 days. There's a lot of leafleting and door knocking coming up over the next couple of weeks, so I intend to be match fit, or at least fit enough to match anyone else for pace. Returning to Parliament this week, our Alliance of European National Movements continues to progress. Tomorrow morning, our website will be publishing some of the very inspiring footage of one of our affiliate organisations, All Polish Youth, on the march for a better future in which young Poles can stay and build a better country for themselves, rather than doing British workers out of jobs. I'm pleased to have played a small part in bringing the previously badly splintered nationalist movement in Poland together. They do have a long way to go, but there's great potential for our message out there, so wish them well. Also on the subject of the Alliance, I, together with Bruno Golnisch and Bela Kovac, met this week for the first time with a team of auditors from the internationally famous accountancy firm Ernst & Young, who will be auditing the Alliance accounts for the European Parliament. They seem reasonable, professionally detached from politics and businesslike, and I hope we'll have a good relationship with them. Because the British National Party is classified by the Electoral Commission as a major party, our accounts are also audited to blue-chip company standards each year. This does impose a heavy administrative burden on us. We're up there in the same category and inspected to the same stringent standards as the heavily state-subsidised Westminster parties, even though we get no state support to ease the burden. Unlike all the midget parties out there, we have to keep and provide detailed records not just of the actual income and expenditure, but also of approval procedures for spending, audit trails and checks and balances at every stage of every penny's journey through the party. The good thing about all this, of course, is that it means that everyone can be 100% certain that everything is all proper and correct with our finances. There was nothing unusual on the voting front this week. The usual hundreds of nitpicking amendments, the usual attempts by the far left and Greens to turn proposals which are merely expensive and dangerous into ones which are totally insane and guaranteed to end in disaster. The only thing of note was the attitude of the Italian Vice President who oversaw the voting on Wednesday. We were voting to sign off, or in my case to refuse to sign off, the reports on different budgets. He decided it would be a good idea to call the votes, those for, against, abstain, for, against, abstain, for, against, abstain, faster than any translator could keep up. Indeed, faster than we could raise and lower our hands to indicate how we wished to vote. He seemed to think it was either a competition or a joke. But personally, I see nothing funny in steamrollering votes to approve of the blowing of billions of pounds of taxpayers' money on the most insane, extravagant and dangerous elitist utopianism in history. I'll see if I can find the time to track the footage down on the Parliament's TV station and get it put on BNP TV to show you what I mean. The sight of such a pitiful and tatty fig leaf failing to cover up such an ugly collection of totalitarian bollocks isn't pretty, but it is instructive. Meanwhile, out in the real world, there's been some serious drama and history going on. I said all I intend to say about Margaret Thatcher this time last week. Judging from the large number of appreciative and thoughtful comments on the text version of my talk, which appeared on our website on the day of her funeral, I hit the nail on the head as far as most nationalists are concerned. Whatever your view of her, however, it's an incontrovertible fact that, as my Vlaams Belang MEP friend Philip Kleist said to me, the British really do ceremony very well. Indeed we do, and we can and should still take pride in that. Similarly, whatever one's view of Margaret Thatcher, there could be no excuse whatsoever for the twisted, ugly, bile-spewing leftists who disgraced themselves with their juvenile but hate-filled demonstrations at her funeral. I wonder if David Cameron is proud of himself over his sponsorship of this gang of subhuman rejects, because they were just united against fascism under a different red flag of convenience, and he remains one of UAF's founding sponsors. Shame on you, Cameron. Shame on you. The even bigger news, of course, is the vile terrorist bombing of the Boston Marathon and the, as I record this, unexplained but even more deadly fertilizer plant explosion in Texas. My initial reaction to the Boston bombings was, I have to confess, slightly uncharitable. It made me think of the Warrington bomb, which murdered 4-year-old Jonathan Ball and 12-year-old Timothy Parry. A significant proportion of the blood money that was used to fund the IRA's long and brutal campaign of terror came from Boston. Sinn Féin IRA still raise money in the USA for their war by other means against our brothers and sisters in Ulster. So if they now find it harder to collect it in Boston, then a little tiny bit of good will have come out of the evil unleashed at the marathon there. A more cowardly and callous choice of target is hard to imagine. Families waiting for their loved ones to cross the line at the end of a race for which they've trained for months. Most of those present involved in raising money for wonderful causes. Here too, though, there's a deep, brutal political lesson to be learnt. Not just the fresh confirmation, for anyone still brainwashed enough to need it, that Islam, at least in the radical, authentic, archaic form that has such a grip on more and more young Muslims today, is indeed a vicious, wicked faith. There is also the fact that the Chechenian strain of the Islamist virus has been incubated, at least in part, by the US-based neocon, Zionist, liberal capitalist, CIA alliance. The Chechenian terrorists have been excused, encouraged, funded and trained in an attempt to destabilise Russia and to put pressure on Vladimir Putin. How ironic, but also very predictable, that just as the Western backing for the Afghan rebels against the old Soviet Union led to the blowback of Al-Qaeda, so the same suspect's proxy terror campaign against nationalist Russia has now brought death and terror to America. The Grim Reaper, who first struck on the streets of Moscow and in the school of Beslan, has moved on to Boston. If at some stage he strikes also on our streets, then our ruling elite will also bear a share of the blame, because when the Islamists target innocent people in Russia, they decided that the ends justified the means and blamed Russia rather than Islam. Tragically for the innocents of Boston, what goes around comes around. As for the shattering explosion in Texas, the worst thing there surely is the death of the firemen. Of all the land-borne emergency services, they have to be the bravest. Their loss, wherever in the world it occurs, darkens any day. Still, this week's news of state funerals and bomb blasts will soon become what would have been next week's chip papers, were it not for an earlier set of nanny state regulations voted hastily through the European Parliament by MEPs anxious to go for lunch. For those who remain, life goes on, and fresh history has to be made. That's our job, by the way. Yes, you and me. Because if we don't do it, why should anyone else?
Thank you very much, Nick. I'm retaining the picture of your knees in a summer dress, but not the fig leaves and totalitarian bollocks. World news. Brothers from Chechnya behind Boston Marathon bombing. Authorities have told NBC News that one of the bombing suspects was killed early today after he and his brother robbed a 7-Eleven, killed a police officer, carjacked a sports utility vehicle and hurled explosives in a firefight with law enforcement officers. The dead suspect, Tamerlane Tsarnaev, 26 years old and born in Russia, was run over by a vehicle during the fight. His brother, Zhokar, 19 years old and born in Kyrgyzstan, is still at large. Boston has been effectively shut down as the Massachusetts National Guard seal off Boston and the FBI and police begin a house-to-house search. World8 comments, if it was in the UK, all our lefties will be demonstrating for the killer's human rights and the media would be asking, why did this happen? Muslim Brotherhood links Boston attack to anti-Islam conspiracy. A leader of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood on Tuesday linked the Boston bombings to an anti-Islamic conspiracy. In a post on his personal Facebook page, Muslim Brotherhood Vice President Essam El Arian suggested the attack was part of a global plot to discredit Islam, citing violence in Mali, Syria, Somalia and other Muslim nations, The Hill reported. Our sympathy with the families of the victims and the American people do not stop us from reading into the grave incident, he wrote, according to an English translation. This series of events began with the sending of French battalions to Mali in a war against organisations that are being said to belong to Al-Qaeda. World Day states, sounds like a call to terrorism to me. Boston bombings a message to the West, Muslim cleric says. Egyptian Salafi Sheikh Murgan Salam warns France that it could be next if it continues to fight its campaign in Mali. In a video from Egyptian TV translated by the Middle East Media Research Institute, Egyptian Salafi clerk Sheikh Murgan Salam said he didn't know who was behind the attack, but if it was done by the Mujahideen, Islamist fighters, it serves as a message to America and the West. We are still alive, we have not died. This was not up to the standard of Al-Qaeda. It was extremely amateurish, said the cleric, who boasted of a close relationship with the dead former Al-Qaeda head Osama bin Laden. The standards and techniques of Al-Qaeda are much higher. But regardless of who did it, he said, the message that we can reach you whenever and wherever we want was conveyed. Salam praised the advances made in the war with America over the past 30 years, especially the relocation of the war from Arab countries to US soil. World Day says, I think everyone listening will back me up in helping this creep shove his opinion where the sun don't shine. Arrested man wanted to start sex slave operation. Florida's Brevard County Sheriff's deputies have arrested a man they said came to the United States intending to start a sex slavery operation. Shuhail Mahbub Ali, 39, is a citizen of Great Britain who came here to have sex with a minor girl and have children he planned to exploit, sheriff's officials said. It is truly unimaginable that monsters exist and walk amongst us with the purpose of victimising our most precious citizens, Sheriff Wayne Ivey said. I want this message to be absolutely crystal clear. We will use every lawful resource we have in our possession to find and remove you from society if you try to harm a child, no matter where you may be on this planet. Ali came to Brevard County on Saturday and was arrested in the Titusville area. It was at his arrest that Ali met the girl he had travelled so far to meet, an undercover sheriff's agent. He's scheduled to make an initial appearance in federal court in Orlando. World Today says, it wouldn't surprise me if our bleeding hearts want him sent back to the UK because his human rights won't be catered for in a Florida prison. Rayford is a nice place for these perverts, and its hardened criminals make sure these child molesters feel right at home, and I mean right at home. Thought for the day, bedroom tax, extensions and where beat the heart of a nation. Words fail me on some of the news items and research we've turned up this week, and not much of it in a good way. So here are a few thoughts for the oncoming weekend for my listeners. First reported in the Mail under the heading Entire Gardens Will Be Concreted Over in Extensions Shake-Up. Sound good to you? Sounds absolutely wonderful to me. This is the brainchild and would-be popular making idea of David Cameron under his plans due to come into being later this year for 3 years, which should see the ruin of many an area. Single-storey extensions of up to 26 feet could be built anywhere without the need for planning consent. The Local Government Association says quite rightly it will spoil neighbourhoods, create disputes and increase flood risks. All of that will be ignored, of course, and the ridiculous thing is that for years in certain heavily occupied Asian areas in this country, they've already been erecting tents and garden sheds to let out to other immigrants in their often poky back gardens without a thought for their sometimes indigenous neighbours. And this new welcome to our country lapse will be the red flag for thousands of ugly makeshift edifices arising from these communities like heaps of dung with the accompanying flies on them. Can you imagine the idea of a small prayer tower just outside your bedroom window next door? Don't laugh, it could happen. You and I know only too well that most of the good laws in this country have been amended to suit the immigrants, and this law will give them great cause for joy. In fact and in truth, Slough, Berkshire and High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire CCs have been ignoring the problem of shacks and shanty towns in back gardens for years, no doubt because a large proportion of its council members are ethnic landlords and the remainder are whites who are either intimidated or taking backhanders. All Cameron will do is legalise the illegal that is already taking place. Now, to be really popular, Cameron should have brought in stricter R&Rs for local councils and paid people to enforce them, not done this. What does he care? Much like the Labour government and their immigration push, they don't have to live with the results, we, however, do. This problem of so-called extensions will wreak havoc in the north of the country, where the massive Asian and Muslim communities already hold sway over their white neighbours. And it will be much easier for those immigrants who want the house next door just to erect an extension blocking all light and fill it with paying relatives or friends, have the whole area reeking of curry and noise, car doors slamming all hours and more, and the poor people next door will be only too grateful to move out and make way for guess who? That nice Asian bloke next door. Mission accomplished. The new spare bedroom tax will not affect these people, will it? Why? Because most of these people who will build are not in council accommodation or accommodation that their local councils pay for. Thus they will be exempt, as indeed they have been for years. No doubt the many Muslims in council homes will play the prayer room card, which has raised its ugly head. Now, what is the difference in a room space between a child using a room when it stays with one of its parents, or a family of Muslims in which the men use a room 4 times a day for raising their bums to Mecca? No difference at all. No, actually there is a difference. The child couldn't stay with her father if she has to sleep on a sofa. That impinges on her quality of life and her human rights. Whether some group of strangers have somewhere to pray doesn't. Let them go to sodding Mecca and not come back. This tax is just another stealth tax to non-ethnics, and my tribe will suffer. It is especially galling as this tax comes in around the time of the extension giveaway, and you have to be a fool not to see which is pandering to whom. Talking about the north and some of the scenes in that region on Wednesday, i.e. the burning of a Maggie Guy and people gathered in quaffing large amounts of beer outside a pub, I was drawn to the fact that if these guys are so poor, how come they can afford drinks at a pub? I can't. Now, in case you think as a southerner born and bred I have something against northerners and the north, you'll be barking up the wrong tree in the wrong forest in the wrong place. My eldest son was born in Leamington Spa and we lived in Kenilworth for some years. And although not considered up north, to me, a Londoner, anything north of the Thames is clogs and whippets time. Now, although these particular times were the most miserable of my life, I must admit that since joining the British National Party, all the trips I've made up north have been great. People up north are friendlier, booze is cheaper, and parts of the countryside are truly scenic. I still can't get the fact that all matter of food is stuffed into baps, or that they seem to embrace curries more than I would like, but you can't have everything. The general message is a good-natured, you may not like what we are or what we do, but we ain't stopping. But the one thing I would say about the north and some of the feedback on Baroness Thatcher's demise and funeral was when one rather toothless guy spitting beer in all directions, the news team really do pick 'em, don't they, waved his arm in the general direction of crumbling red buildings and shuttered shops, which resemble just about every other high street from the north down to London, and blamed Maggie for all of it. I presume it was a mining village during her sojourn in office. Now, I'm not from a mining family, I'm not from the north, and I can't imagine going down into the pits to work every day. I would feel just like the horses and canaries down there, absolutely bloody terrified. But I would say that when the north was a great industrialised part of this country about 150 years ago, it was not just mines that shored up the north and provided a very good living for many local people and for owners down south as well. Wikipedia states, the Industrial Revolution began in Britain and within a few decades spread to Western Europe and the United States. The first Industrial Revolution evolved into the Second Industrial Revolution in the transition years between 1840 and 1870, when technological and economic progress gained momentum with the increasing adoption of steam-powered boats, ships and railways, the large-scale manufacture of machines tools and the increasing use of steam-powered factories. It was mainly these new industries in the north of England that provided the world with the best textile industries and steel. We utilised metallurgy, steam power and chemicals. We had gas lighting, mining, glass making, paper machines and agriculture, and this led to better canals, roads, railways and shipping. There was also, of course, a leap ahead in child labour and the misery that brought. But the massive industry carried out in the north beat the heart of this nation during all those years well into the 20th century. Now, most, if not all, these industries departed our soil many years ago, well before the miners' strike, and I believe that many of the mining villages were the last true remainders of British industry in this country. So for that very angry guy, the rot had already set in up north, and I believe is still doing so. Wool, that prime reason the Industrial Revolution took off in the first place, is proving contentious again. At the Bulmer and Lum textiles in Yorkshire, they have withstood the artificial textiles rush and are on the up again. However, Mr Waterhouse sources his wool from Australia, South Africa and Uruguay, which hardly helps the British sheep farmer. And he has invested in another factory. Where? In the needy north, you say? No, in Poland. So here we have a northerner deliberately not investing in his own country. How many others are guilty of this through the ages? Thousands is my guess. The hard truth is that no greater care was taken over these many lost British industries in the 1980s than has been taken since, even during a progressive new Labour government. Another truth is that massive immigration into many of these already hard-hit areas has not helped. They've taken away what jobs might have been because it is mostly Asians who have taken over in the north the formerly British businesses of corner shops, taxis, local restaurants, small family grocers, greengrocers, sweet and paper shops, petrol stations, small clothing stores and every other type of shop that is easily buyable. They've set up their own legal firms and lending businesses, medical clinics and you name it and they have it. They will, however, rarely, if ever, employ indigenous local labour. Local beer halls are shut down or converted to mosques or Islamic centres. Community youth centres are overrun with ethnics of one sort or another, including the local gyms. It is also no secret that if a Brit can buy anything online, he'd rather do that than go to a shop. So that is another reason why the northern high streets are desolate places. In fact, very similar to outlying districts of many areas of London. Shops shut down, pubs gone, and the only communities in sight, though often not in daylight, are the Asian communities, females trundling oodles of young and baby Asians around our cities and streets. Why doesn't Mr Angry from God-forsaken or wherever demonstrate with passion against them, instead of demonstrating at the funeral of one of his own tribe, albeit a remote relative as such? Why don't the northerners demonstrate against the true nature of the beast? Why heap all the blame for the destruction of the north and indeed the coming destruction of the entire country on someone who is now past? I'm not excusing or ignoring what Maggie did with the miners. She had to crush Scargill and she did. He didn't think of his real countrymen any more than the next Labour union guy. And here I was thinking that unions were brought into being to stop children and families going short, not promoting it, and to welcome better working conditions, not to go on strike, not to use them. So every time a northerner, or us, down south, uses or buys goods from a foreign-owned restaurant, takeaway, shop, stall, petrol station, or wears foreign-made cosmetics and wears foreign-made shoes, boots or clothes, you are contributing to the downfall of your own country, so don't complain. The term use it or lose it applies. Virtually nothing we buy or use is made in England, and that is not just a northern problem, it is just one they have ignored and it's passed down the line. The good thing is that we have the British National Party to fight for us, but the sad thing is the majority of both the north and the south are like the guests at the Masque of the Red Death, laughing and dancing while fellow guests are dropping dead in their midst. Edgar Allan Poe and Vincent Price would roll in their graves. And finally, shell-shocked, or maybe not. It's been reported in the Telegraph that a tortoise that vanished 10 months ago has been found alive and well after being dug up from its garden by a JCB. Paul and Yvette White found their tortoise Sydney lying in a pile of rubble that had been dug out as part of their new extension. The couple last saw their 5-year-old pet in June last year and spent 2 weeks looking for him, even calling in a gun dog to see if he could sniff him out. However, their search turned up nothing and they gave up all hope of seeing the creature again. Mr White, 50, said he believed the tortoise had dug himself into the garden after mistaking last year's cool summer for winter. He said, "We got planning permission for an extension and started digging up the land to place the foundations. I started going through it all and spraying some pesticide when I ended up spraying Sydney. I'm amazed how long he's managed to survive for, and I can't believe he survived being dug up by the digger." Sydney, a horse-field tortoise, was bought by Mrs White as a present for her husband in 2011. The couple from Wisbech Cams have now washed Sydney and returned him to his heated vivarium after his extended winter. He's been checked over by the vet and given the all clear. This presenter says, "Well, bless Sydney's little reptilian heart. You see, God works in mysterious ways. Without the possible extension, Sid would have remained there for eternity." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very warm and a very safe weekend.